Here we go. So the purpose of this activity is to help you understand why it might be difficult to read. Okay. And there are a number of reasons why kids might not get to comprehension. So I got 4 volunteers already, and I'm going to ask one of the volunteers to come in and read this passage. You got out of it, didn't you? And if you notice, up here it says 70%. Do you see where it says reader number one, 70% up in the corner? That's because 30% of those words, there are almost 100 words there, so about 30 words, are nonsense words. They don't make any sense. Now, some of the words you can read easily. Well, I'm going to call someone in and I'm going to ask, how well did you read this passage? Okay? So let's see what happens. Who's volunteer number 1? One. I need one. Thank you. Okay. Could you stand about right here? Okay, right here. And could you please read this passage aloud? Could you read it? Do your best reading. Do your best reading. And I may ask you some questions after you read it. Okay, so now that you've read that, thank you. Tell me everything you remember that you just read.
I remember that there are lots of words that I did not know. Yes,
Anything else that you remember about what you read?
not very much at
Not
all
very
because
much.
the words didn't make sense.
The words didn't make sense. And were there some words that were a little bit hard for you to read, even to figure out how to read them?
There were a lot
Okay.
because there were too many consonants.
Thank you. All right. So I'm going to just remind you that with some questions. So what tool was the topic of the passage?
A tragomix?
Tragomix. Okay. And why is the face of a clock mentioned?
Wasn't mentioned.
Okay. What's one theory to explain the tool's behavior?
I have no idea.
Okay. So thank you. You were perfect reader number 1. Okay, you guys, I'm going to explain to her that I tricked you. I turned you into a struggling reader. And how I did that is we substituted, there are 97 words and 30 of those words are nonsense words. I put other words in. And some of them are easy to decode, like tragnex. And other ones, like plivens, you kind of slowed down and figured out how to, because they aren't, if you look, we don't have words in English that have Pliyvn. That's just an unusual pattern. Looks like Polish or something. Okay, so would you guys agree that what we've done is we've simulated 70% accuracy? That they either don't know what the words mean or they can't read them. How was comprehension at 70% accuracy? Zero comprehension. Okay. Does anybody know what this passage is about yet? Okay, now I'm going to call in someone to read with 80% comprehension, and we're going to see if that changes. Now, you guys might get it because remember, you're reading this for the second time. They're reading it for the first time. So I'm going to call in reader number 2. Reader number 2. Thank you. Okay, come on in. And you, thank you for being drafted or volunteering. Could you just stand right there? And what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you to please read this passage aloud. Do your best reading. and I may ask you some questions afterward. So go.
Most will fit in your palm. The face is similar to that of a Bronte, but it has no numbers to mark Hurons. Instead, a Grimnifchik rough arm is in the middle of the trachnic face. No matter which pavilion you are facing, the end of the bronchon always brantless or submuds until it is pointing thence. Simpins aren't sure exactly why trachnexins work. One theory is that a huge deposit of runnet ore is gotthig at the Thames, Leda, and the rodents, or acts as a gremlins.
Hey, thank you. Now, can you tell me everything you remember that you just read?
No,
And why can't you?
there were a lot of nonsense words in there that I did not understand.
Okay, a lot of words you didn't understand. Were there
Yes.
some words that were really hard to read?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you some questions just in case it tickles your brain to answer. What tool is the topic of the passage?
That's a good question.
Okay. And do you have an answer? It's okay.
No,
Okay. Why is the face of a clock mentioned?
that's another good question.
Okay. And what's one theory to explain the tool's behavior?
I have no idea.
Okay, thank you very much. I set you up to be a struggling reader. What I did is this passage has about 100 words, has 97 words. 20 of those are nonsense words. So essentially, you read with 80% understanding. Okay. There are 80%, 20% of the words you didn't know what they meant. And how was your comprehension at 80%? How was it? No comprehension. So we changed 80%, we changed 20% of the words, you guys. And I often hear, I want them to be able to read at 80% accuracy. Okay, 80% accuracy can either refer to I can read the word accurately or I know what it means. What happens when you're at 80% accuracy, you guys? Zero understanding. Zero. Okay, I just want you to get that. And it could be because they can't decode the word because some of the words were hard to decode, or it could be because they don't know what they mean. In this case, it's what you don't know what they mean, but a lot of times the kids decode the word incorrectly. And what happens? It's just like a nonsense word or it doesn't fit. Let's go. And the next time we're going to look at 90% accuracy. So let's see what happens with 90% accuracy. Okay, could I have reader number 3? Thank you, Lita, for being my volunteer. Even though you're drafting. It's just I don't have enough people really to do this simulation. Okay. Okay. So are you ready? I'm gonna have this right over here. Right over here. And I'm going to ask you to read. So this is a passage. Could you please read this passage aloud? Do your best reading. And I'm going to ask you some questions afterward. Hang on. And hold the microphone.
Track nexus. A track nex is a simple tool used for finding directions. Most will fit in your palm. The face is similar to that of a clock, but it has number to mark hours. Instead, a Grimjic arrow is in the middle of the track next face. No matter which direction you're facing, the end of the arrow always rantles or submubs until it is pointing them's. Scientists aren't sure exactly why track nexus work. One theory is that a huge deposit of iron ore is buried at the Thames lithium, and the iron ore acts as a grim.
Nope, you're not done. because I'd like you to please tell me everything you remember about this passage, about reading it.
Ooh, jeez. Something about a clock. And it's not what a normal clock looks like. Anything else beyond that, I do not know.
Okay, well, let me ask a couple of questions. What tool is the topic of the passage?
What?
What tool is the topic of the passage?
I guess it's that track next.
Okay, and do you have another name for a tragnex?
Yeah, it was there.
It's okay. Okay. Why is the face of a clock mentioned?
What? Say it again now.
Why is the face of a clock mentioned?
I guess it was some type of similarity.
Okay. And what's one theory to explain the tool's behavior?
I do not know.
Hey, thank you very much. You were perfect. You're actually kind of fun. I'd like to hang out with you. It'll just a minute. Just a minute. Okay. So what we did is I set you up to be a struggling reader. Okay. I set you up. Now, you guys, what is this passage about? Okay, you guys don't know. I want to know what's it about? It's about a compass. It describes a compass. Okay, at 90% accuracy, and you know what a compass is, right? She couldn't get it. Do you see? What I want to emphasize is how important accuracy is, that or understanding the vocabulary, either one. Okay. Now, so I set it up where 10% of those words, 10 of those words were nonsense words. And even with just 10 words, you can't get to the meaning. You've got to be able to either read them accurately or know what they mean. Okay? So now we're going to do, okay, Lita, come on in. We want you to stand right here. Okay? And could you please read this passage aloud? Do your best reading because I may ask you some questions. With
Tragnexes. A tragnex is a simple tool used for finding directions. Most will fit in your palm. The face is similar to that of a clock, but it has no numbers to mark hours. Instead, a Grimnick arrow is in the middle of a tragnex face. No matter which direction you are facing, the end of the arrow always spins or rotates until it is pointing north. Scientists aren't exactly sure why tragnexes work. One theory is that a huge deposit of iron ore is buried at the North Pole, and the iron ore acts as a grimnage.
could you please tell me everything you remember about what you just read?
A tragnex is a tool that always has points north, and nobody knows how it works, but there might be iron ore at the North Pole that makes the arrow point that way.
What tool is this? Do you have another name for this tool?
No.
I'm going to just ask you a couple of questions. What tool is the top?
The tragnex,
Face of a clock mentioned.
because that's like the face of a tragnex.
Explain the tool's behavior.
Another word for magnets. Gragnich.
Okay, thank you, Lita. Lita read with 95% accuracy. And what's the tool, you guys? This is describing a compass. Even with 95% accuracy, she did not make the connection between compass and tragnex. Yeah. Oh, did you know? Did you know? You knew? Okay. Okay. Just to let you know, 95% accuracy, if you don't have background knowledge, will not give you very good. The reason that you can get this without 100% accuracy, get something out of it, which not it didn't happen until 95% accuracy. Did you notice that? 90% accuracy wasn't enough, is because you had background knowledge. And so without background knowledge, you got to have even more than that. Okay? Lita, you don't have to stay if you don't want to, but thank you very much for being my reader. Okay. Um, so you guys, I'd like to talk. Well, first of all, now this was the 90%, and here is the whole passage. You guys want to read the whole thing without any errors? Go ahead, read it. You read it. You
No, I don't want to read
No,
out loud.
go.
No. She gets to.
Okay.
A compass is a simple tool used for finding directions. Most will fit in your palm. The face is similar to that of a clock, but it has no numbers to mark hours. Instead, a magnetic arrow is in the middle of the compass face. No matter which direction you are facing, the end of the arrow always spins or rotates until it's pointing north. Scientists aren't sure exactly why compasses work. One theory is that a huge deposit of iron ore is buried at the North Pole, and the iron ore acts as a magnet.
Thank you very much. So that's the whole passage. You would have had, you would have been able to answer all those questions if I hadn't thrown some nonsense words or some words that were difficult to decode. Who was reader number one? Reader number one. Ah, did those words that were difficult to decode, the ones that were like, how do you pronounce that? Did that throw off your comprehension at all?
That I was not. It seems to me like I would have remembered the iron ore and some things like that, but I was so focused on decoding, I was not paying attention to the other words.
And that is what happens when some of your kids, your older kids, don't know how to decode. My gosh, they're trying to figure out what that word is, or they're skipping it, or something that is totally throwing off their comprehension. Reader number two. Who was reader number two? How'd you feel up there reading? How did you feel? Were you happy to be doing it? Did you think, oh my gosh, I'm in front of all my friends, I'm not doing well? What did you think?
I was going to say the same thing. I think I was more focused on the decoding part of it, that I really forgot that I was reading to comprehend what I read. So I think that was the impact from just trying to figure out what is this word and how do I pronounce it.
You see how important it is for easy and quick decoding to occur in order to get to comprehension? Okay, when you were up there, were you kind of humiliated or embarrassed or anything like that, or was it just fine?
I was fine, but I think for a student, it could be humiliating and embarrassing because kids are snickering and trying to figure out, okay, well, why is she not able to pronounce that? Or, you know, um, it could be difficult for a student, and then that could decrease their confidence as well.
Yes. Okay, you were my reader number three. You were darling. I really do want to hang out with you. Okay. Um, you did something that struggling readers do because you knew you didn't know the answers, right? She said, what was that question again? That is a behavior of struggling readers. Do you guys recognize that when I say that? What was that question again? You did that. You're not a struggling reader. You're a strong reader, but I made you a struggling reader. And what happened when I made you a struggling reader? You turned into a struggling reader. Isn't that right? I mean, that behavior, and how did you feel when you were up there reading?
Okay, so yeah, even the words, the vocabulary, didn't know what they mean. So obviously, the comprehension part I was not gonna get.
And how did you feel?
Incompetent.
And you knew I was setting you up. Is that right? Oh, did you kind of figure it out? Did you figure it out later?
Well, yeah.
Okay, so I called you up. So as you were reading, did you wish that you had stayed home and washed your hair today?
Well, I'm always up for a challenge. So, I could read it, but still the comprehension part.
You did. You read it just fine, and you didn't understand, and it still was a little embarrassing in front of your peers. And I set you up. I mean, I had that. I set you up. So think of if you weren't, if that was really how you comprehended, how embarrassing it would be. So, what did you as observers notice about the readers? Anything you noticed? Anybody notice anything about the readers as they read? What happened when they came to a word they didn't know how to decode very well?
They had to stop and sound it out.
And we talked about what happens when you have to stop and sound it out. Your brain goes away from thinking about what you're reading and goes to, oh my gosh, I don't know this word. What is this word? Yes, no word, no room left to do comprehension. I already addressed. Did you see some of the behaviors that your students have when they read? You were so cute because your two behaviors were asking the question again and laughing. You know, you just looked at it and you laughed. And that sometimes, do you see your students doing that? They're trying to do anything to get out of oh, this is funny. Okay, now, did anybody notice fluency or rate being affected? What did you notice? Go ahead.
We were talking about that it's a fluency issue because I'm stopped myself to figure out the letters together. So I've totally missed what was going on in that whole sentence.
I think what we want to say is that when the decoding was difficult, it became a rate issue. It slowed your rate down. And one of the things that I would encourage you guys to think about is when kids are not fluent, we tend to think that fluency and rate are synonyms. And actually, fluency is a combination of rate and accuracy. And so I like to not really ask how fluent are they. I like to say, are they accurate or are they slow? Which one? You know, well, you all who were readers were slow because the decoding was difficult. You were accurate. Most of you read the words correctly. Did you see that? But they weren't quick at their decoding. Okay, a lot of times you will have that. So that was a rate problem caused by decoding. That you look at it and you go, no word has YNJ. What kind of word is that? And if I had prepped you beforehand, then you wouldn't have had any problems with those. Decoding them, then it would have been you didn't understand what they meant. But you had both. Okay. So what I would like to do is I need another volunteer who hasn't volunteered. Oh, who am I going to choose? Who will volunteer who hasn't volunteered? Would you do it? Yeah. Okay. You can stay right there and do it. I'm going to show some words and I'm going to ask you to please read this set of words. Okay? You can hold the microphone.
Tragnex, Lizmad, Bronte, Rantals, Submubs, Flormy.
Set number one. Now can you read this one?
Profound, Skinpins, Gojend.
Which one is harder? Which set is harder?
The second one.
The second one. And I can tell you why it's harder, or you can tell me. Which would you like?
There are a lot of closed syllables in the first one, and then I don't know.
That is one reason. Is the structure of the first words is easier. The second one, OW could be O or ow. So you have to make a decision. Is that braphone or is that profound? That could either be sin pins where the C is silent, or it could be skin pins. And the third one could be go gind or go jined or go ginned or go ginned. Do you see that? So you have choices, which is why the second is harder, because you need, if those were real words, we'd need to know what's the vocabulary word to know how to pronounce it. Okay. Now I'm going to have you read the third one.
Oh, joy. Grimnajik, Jide, Plivens, Brisbane, Winds, Hurrens, Plake, Ing, Themix, Simd.
Which of those three was the hardest? And why is that?
There are letters that could be silent, like WR in number 6. The QUE could be K in number 7. There are letters that could be K or S. There are some consonant blends that are not in English.
Yes. So those become even harder. This simulates, because I'm trying to do a simulation where you guys understand struggling readers. This simulates words that are like yacht, that, oh my God, you see what I'm saying? So when they come to that, don't necessarily follow the rules, but if you know what the word is and you've seen it before, you would have an orthographic mapping of that. Okay. So we had now after I just want to ask you guys, and this is a tough one because usually I do this with a big group, but how would you change your teaching after seeing this? Is there anything that you thought about what the what the kids are experiencing? And maybe what I'd like you to do is just take a minute and talk with whoever you're talking to. Can you talk with your group? Is there anything you learned from this that might change your teaching, or if you're a coach, change how you recommend what you say to teachers about struggling readers? And I'll give you about a minute to talk. Okay, so make sure that you wouldn't put kids on the spot. And another thing you came up with is that you would pre-teach the words that you thought might be difficult for them. Now that would be decoding. Might you do the same thing with vocabulary words? Front load the vocabulary words too. Okay, what'd you guys come up with?
Like how much the accuracy and how much like 70, 80, 90%, and you still really couldn't. And really we figured it out because the questions were like something about the clock. And so we were like, well, it has to be something. So like about the third time we heard it, we could kind of figure it out. But even when Lita read it, she couldn't with the, what was it?
She said she's dyslexic and couldn't come up with the word compass. She knew it was a compass, but she couldn't come up with the word. But you're right. You got it after the third time reading it. And And everybody doesn't take 3 times to try to get their comprehension. What'd you guys come up with?
Okay, so in this whole thing, I am dyslexic severely. And so it takes a lot for my brain when I saw all those crazy words. It ticked me off. I was ticked.
And you know what? I wanted this, as much as I hate to say this, part of this simulation is to show what it feels like to be a struggling reader. Yeah.
So in my world, it takes sometimes I can read, I'll be reading the paragraph the first time through. It's beautiful. I can't, but then I'll start needing to spell words and I can spell it the first time, but I can't spell it the second time. I have to go back and look at my first spelling. And I know it's correct because it's sight and phonics all in the same. But if I didn't, it's like I was telling Wendy, this morning I was writing a letter in my head before I write it, and the word was monitor. And for the life of me, I couldn't. And then it dumbfounded me, and I had to stop and completely change my brain to slow down, calm down, and write the word monitor.
Yep. And I think this is particularly, I'm so glad you brought this up because I usually do this, a simulation just for struggling readers. But one of the things, and struggling readers and especially dyslexic kids, they look at that and they go, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. Yeah. And so I'm overwhelmed. And so my job as a teacher, and you guys alluded to this, and you guys alluded to this, everybody alluded to this, is to front load so that they are not overwhelmed. And when I was a teacher, I was an English teacher, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, and I only taught for 3 years. I was a counselor for 2 years. But so I was always the new teacher. And the new teacher, when I was a teacher, always got all the kids nobody else wanted. And so those were obviously all the kids who didn't read, except I was a middle school teacher, and it never occurred to me that they couldn't read. But what I would do is I knew that some kids were more confident and other kids were less confident. If we were having something that we were going to read, I would go over. And like, if let's pretend that you're my strong readers and you're my struggling readers. You guys, I don't go over anything. But with you, I would sit down and say, I'm going to call on you for this paragraph. So let's go over this paragraph. I'm going to call on you for this paragraph. So that you all have some prompting. That was not teaching. Do you understand that that was not teaching? I didn't know how to teach people to read, but what I did know how to do was front load so that they weren't embarrassed when they read. And I think that's something that came out of this is that if we front load, and there are 2 ways to do it. If it's totally overwhelming for the kid, and you guys brought this up, don't call on someone if they can't read it. Don't put them on the spot. Well, if you think they need to do it, then just sit with them and say, hey, we're going to go over this. And do you think you can do it? Yeah, okay. Then I'll call on you for this paragraph. I'll call on you for this paragraph. The other thing is we've got to teach kids to decode. And if they're in the 4th grade and they don't know how to decode, this is my opinion. This is my very strong opinion. It should not be up to the 4th grade teacher for total responsibility for teaching that kid to decode. I'm in a class, I'm working in a district right now, and the state mandates that anybody who is not at benchmark on DIBELS gets 30 minutes. They have a certain number of minutes. And if you did it, it would be 30 minutes for 6 weeks of intervention in a group no larger than 4. They do not say the groups have to be homogeneous. They do not say that the groups, what they will get. They just say groups of 4. So this school is putting kids who have comprehension difficulties with kids who have, because they're just trying to meet the mandate. And a kid who is high yellow, almost benchmark doesn't need nearly as much time as a kid who is a very low kid. So there's nothing about that, and it drives me nuts because and then on top of that, the classroom teacher has to do the intervention. So when I have a 5th grade classroom teacher who's required to work with a very low kid, they don't know how to teach phonics. And it's not fair. And what they say is, well, give us a program. Well, I don't care what program you have. If you don't understand phonics, all you can do is read the script, and that's not teaching. Do you get what I'm saying? So we have to teach these kids how to decode. And if they don't have the vocabulary, that's where we can preload. The classroom teacher can do that, can preload vocabulary. Is there anything else you guys got out of this simulation after I threw my little fit at the beginning? Anything else? Did you get anything else out of this simulation? Did you find it interesting?
Imperative.
Yes.
I've looked at a lot of IEPs and things that said 80%, and that would not do it.
I am so glad that you said that, because IEPs, this is my theory about IEPs, that if you're doing comprehension, what they used to do is they would say the kid can read and answer 4 out of 5 questions accurately, which turns into 80%. I think if you read a passage and the questions are good and you can answer 4 out of 5, that's probably good enough. But it is not good enough to be able to read 80% of the words correctly. We're not about comprehension. We're about a skill. And here's what I don't want. I don't want a pilot who got 80% on his final pilot. I mean, when you have a skill, you've got to be able to do it to perfection. My father built airplanes. He was an engineer and worked at a big factory, and it was called Rockwell. And I don't want 4 out of 5 rivets correct, and the 5th rivet isn't correct. 80% isn't enough when you're talking about a skill or something that needs to be done. So well, you need to fight that.
Well, I understand, but I don't know how you would actually write the IEP and say you have to get 100%. The problem is I have a child that they want only 30% right. 30%.
This is 30% right on what?
On a reading comprehension.
Okay, well, what about reading accuracy?
CVC.
Okay, they want 30% on CVC words. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
But
Yeah.
That's the way the IEP
Yeah.
was written. And it came to me that way. And until I have another meeting with the parent,
Yeah.
I will change that.
Send it to the New York Times. I'm serious. I mean, that's the thing that ought to be publicized, is that some educator is saying a child needs to learn. Now, I don't have a problem if they say by September, I want them to be able to read 30%. By October, I want it to be 40. By November, do you see what I'm saying?
But it is. It's 9 weeks, 9 weeks, 9 weeks. But the first 9 weeks, I'm only doing 30%.
Well, no, you should be aiming for more.
Well,
But yeah.
I know what you're doing, but I mean, that's.
Yeah, it's just nuts. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I agree. Okay, anything else that came out of this? Do you guys have anything that you got out of it? Okay, well, let me tell you something, that if you would like to do this with your school, with anyone in your school, you can write me at linda@readsters.com and ask for the slides. And what you have to put in the email, and the slides, by the way, I can't show you because I don't have access to this, but the slides they have presenters notes. Do you know how when you have PowerPoint slides down at the bottom, there are presenters notes for you? So just write Linda Farrell. It's Linda, Linda, at Readsters, ReadSters.com, and tell me that you saw these in Meridian or at the Illuminations Conference, and that you understand that you aren't to share them with anyone else. That we only share with people who've been through our simulation. Okay, so if you want them and you would like to do this with your group. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Linda. You did awesome.